And it is time once again to take that journey of faith and that big, explosive leap of faith into the world of the Fakertarians on this June 13th, 2020, with your special guest, Spike Cohen. Right now, it's your host, John Hudak. John.
Hey, guys, and welcome to the Fakertarians podcast. I'm your host, John Hudak, along with Brian Hagan, Jeremy Kontorowitz, and Jordan Logue. Today, we have on Spike Cohen, the vice presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party. How you doing, Spike?
I'm doing amazingly, guys. How are you doing?
Good. So I think the question on everyone's mind right now is, have you begun to wear a shirt at the beach?
Yes, I've started. It's been an odd transition into the general election, but I have started wearing all of my clothing while showering, while it's an interesting situation with the toilet now, and also at the beach. Really, anytime I always am wearing at least. I'm at least covering it. I sometimes occasionally show my calves, and I do occasionally show like part of my, like if I have like a collared shirt on, and I do sometimes wear short sleeves so you can see that. So I try to keep it minimal. I try to show no more than like 19 or 20% of my body at any given time.
That may be a bit too much, though, I think. You might want to revisit that idea of short sleeves at any time, Spike. I mean,
I definitely want to be respectable, yes.
We live in a society. Don't forget that.
We do live in a society.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of push about wearing a tank top on every show I've gone on, so I decided to go with the suit today. But just so I'm expecting people to take me a little more seriously.
I'm already taking you way more seriously. I've always thought you were a total joke and that you were the reason why Libertarians lost. And now... totally changed my mind. Now Libertarians lose despite you.
So now that you're wearing a shirt more, when do you think you'll be receiving the coveted Sam Coppinger endorsement?
Any minute now. Any minute. I think between me wearing a shirt and him spending more time at the autonomous zone, I'm thinking that all of that is going to lend itself towards the oh no. What? I think it's going to lend itself. I think it's going to lend itself towards him coming home to daddy, because we all know that libertarian memes for neoliberal teens is a front group for my political ambitions.
Absolutely. So speaking of your political ambitions, so as the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, how will you live up to the legacy of the great Bill Weld?
The great Bill Weld. I am looking for Democrats who want to be endorsed in this cycle. I've reached out to pretty much the whole Democrat ticket to see, how many are fitting in my idea of sort of a no labels Main Street version of the Democratic Party that I think that would be very helpful for them moving forward. I think Joe Biden was an amazing pick for them. And so I think anything we can do to vouch for him. I probably need to make it clear that I'm joking, because I'm sure this will be the next Rage Post series that will be happening, that, Spike Cohen endorsed Joe Biden and said he was great. No, how will I live up to the legacy of Bill Weld?
The great Bill Weld.
I guess by quitting as soon as leaving the party, as soon as it's politically expedient, and then running as a Republican or something. I don't know. I'm not sure I can live up to his legacy, because I plan on running as a Libertarian and promoting the Libertarian Party and helping down ballot candidates, and then remaining in the party and continuing to agitate for the party, whether we win or lose in this cycle, and never joining the major parties to sell out for them.
So you were on Tom Woods' show recently, and I thought you did a really great job.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of controversy within some libertarian circles about Woods. I mean, he has his detractors, he has his supporters, that kind of stuff. Have you received any criticism about appearing on the show? Because I saw that Joe did. And if so, how do you respond to that criticism?
So I had a handful of people that, first of all, I made clear, because I have a lot of people that are in the Audacious Caucus, Vermin Supreme team, and all of that are on my campaign team and that are big supporters of mine. So I actually reached out to him ahead of time and said, listen, I'm going to be on the Tom Woods show. I'm going on to talk libertarianism, to talk about everything we've been talking about. I'm not going to change my message in any way because I'm on Tom Woods show. I think it's an excellent opportunity to get our message out to as wide an audience as possible. I plan, if I'm invited to, we have it in the works to be on Dave Smith's show. I will go on any show. I'll go on Sean Hannity for that matter. I actually told Tom Woods that. I said, not to compare you to Sean Hannity, but I'll go on anything. Like if I can get in front of lots of people and spread a message of liberty and talk about self-ownership and non-aggression and property rights and voluntary solutions and healing the rifts and the damage and the abuse that's happening at the hands of the omnipotent state, why would I not do that? And so that's my thought with that. So I've had a few people that are like, well, by even going on there, you're granting him legitimacy or whatever. And I will admit that because I'm not as active on the day-to-day of Twitter, I'm not, well versed on every single scandal related to Tom Woods. And I have listened to episodes of Tom Woods before, but they've been when my friends have been on that show. But I know he's also one of the more popular libertarian podcasters. So I saw an opportunity and I took it and gave the same message I always give.
I think it would be absolutely ridiculous to pass that up. I mean,
Right.
I've been involved in those conversations online where people say, "Oh, well, how are you adding legitimacy to Tom Woods? He's already out there. He's a huge broadcaster, a huge podcaster." Now, if you went on somebody like that Hal kid or that, that Benji kid, these little fringe little neo-Nazi types who think they have a show when in fact it's like their mom and like their methed out neighbor listening, that's a different deal.
Yeah, and even some of the more popular ones, I'm not going on Chris Cantwell's show. There's nothing redeemable that's going to happen there. Now, the beauty is, as a Jewish anarchist in an interracial marriage with an immigrant, I'm probably not welcome on those shows anyway to begin with. So, I mean, it's kind of a powerful inoculation that happens there of just who I am as a person. Where the spaces where I really wouldn't want to go into, I'm probably equally not welcome there to begin with. So it's like a mutual understanding between me and the Klan that that I'm not welcome in their spaces. So that works out well for me. Well, would you go on the Klan? I doubt they'd have me, but if I get an invitation from the Klan, I'm going to remind them of who I am. That reminds me. So 10 years ago, and it had to have just been a general mailer. I got a mail, and my neighbors did as well, got a mailer from the National Socialist Party. And it was all about how we need to see a resurgence of fascism and all this stuff. And I was so tempted to write them back because it came with like a return envelope if I wanted to donate to the cause of fascism. And so this was like 2010, or maybe it was like somewhere time 2009, 2011, 2010, something like that. And so I was so tempted to write them back and not give them anything, but just put in a note and says, "You know what the last name Cohen is, right?" Like someone hand wrote my name on a sheet on a thing, and I'm like, "So this isn't an auto mailer. You saw Cohen and went, yep, he wants to hear the message of national socialism and protecting our white future and all this stuff." And I'm like, I think you need to do some market research there. So no, I will go into spaces that I can effectively spread the message of liberty. And I believe Tom Woods 100% was one of those.
Sure. I do too, because the majority of his listeners, I don't think are in some sort of a secret white nationalist camp at all. I just think that he sometimes flirts with the wrong sort of people like Molyneux and all of that. But yeah, I don't think his show in general is a terrible place to be. Yeah. Have you ever, and I pose this to everyone here, speaking of the Klan and Molyneux and all that, have any of you, and maybe this is why they went ahead and sent you a mailer, Spike, have any of you ever watched the official KKK videocast?
Have I been on it? Are you asking if I've been on it?
You've watched it. You need to watch it sometime.
God, I hope not.
It's everything you'd think it would be. It's like really low lit rooms with terrible cameras, bad audio, and a guy saying stuff like, "Well, it's this week, and we're going to talk about how all the black folks are rioting out there." Seriously, it's like every stereotype you could take of the Klan, and they've done it to themselves on their little video stream.
Oh, jeez.
Well, then I'm glad they're doing that to themselves. But to be fair, if it is everything I think that it would be, that just solidifies why I haven't watched it yet.
Right.
So I just like to drive that home. But no, I mean, listen, if you have these absurd ideas about race, you are going to be a caricature because you kind of have to be one to think that way. So it's one thing to have what we would consider a problematic view of the riots and of the protests and have more of a, I guess, all lives matter type of mentality or something. That's one thing.
Slaves.
What's that?
The Irish were the first slaves.
Even then, you're starting to go into a thing. I actually wanted to float a reparations plan where the descendants of Irish slavery would get a free pizza at any participating Chuck E. Cheese, but only the participating one. I can't guarantee that they'll all participate. But so it's one thing to have like those kinds of like more mainstreamy, not the best ideas about race type of thing. But when you've gone straight into like, black people aren't as superior as I am, like you really are a character. There has to be a disconnect there that is going to be visible and audible at the same time. Your presence is going to be somewhat of an assault on all of the senses in various ways. Just by you even thinking that way in the first place, you have to be the kind of person that thinks that way. So it's very rare to find a well put together professional racist, because you can't really function in society and have those kinds of hardcore like clan level views. So no, it doesn't surprise me at all that they're as terrible as I would assume they would be.
It's actually kind of entertaining just because of how bad it is.
But then you're giving them views. They're like, we're the most popular clan show on the
Got
internet.
2 viewers.
This Brian Hagan guy watches us every week.
Brian Hagan is sharing our content. One of our favorite. We've actually nominated him for grand whatever now. Wizard, dragon wizard, whatever. I also like that, like, they are kind of a really terrible kind of cosplay where it's like, so like they're doing like, you're a wizard and you're a dragon, and they're wearing like bright purple and like with this crazy fringe on it and everything else. And I'm like, this is like malignant bronies, or like this is like a malignant you're like, it's so like furries are playful and loving. You're like, if there were like a evil version of the Care Bear cousins, that's what they are. They're like the evil Comic-Con. See, I want to say something. I think if I had been cut like John, I wouldn't have gotten nearly the criticism that I got. Because you know what I got a lot of? He's got man tits and he's floppy. Why is he floppy? And I'm like, they're not floppy. I'm just not in the best shape. But I mean, goodness, I'm not floppy. They don't. Like they stay still, but like, if I were cut like you, I think a lot of more people would have been like, well, let's give him a shot, like maybe he's got, let's see where he takes this. But because I look like I do, they were like,
I had this plan the whole time with the suit.
No, that's perfect. No, it became the striptease that people probably wanted from me, but unfortunately I'm not built for it anymore.
I'm probably going to stay as long as the shirt did, because I wasn't going to do that the whole time in my own house.
Well, and I do have to wonder how many of those who have been so critical are just either A, jealous of your build, or who B, secretly really want you and who are looking at your profile every night while their wives are asleep next to them. This is what I wonder.
I would say more of the latter than the former, because there aren't a lot of people that look at this. I say, you haven't seen a body until you've seen the body of a middle-aged Jew with MS. And, I think that, I don't think there are a lot of people looking at that and going, I wish I could look like that. Maybe some people who are, maybe John was a little jealous of the chest hair. I don't know.
Yeah.
But and that's fair. That's a legitimate thing to be jealous of. But in terms of wanting, I think it's probably more wanting. I think it's more that there are people that are like, oh, wow, he really does have a dad bod, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. and then we feel uncomfortable feelings and we react angrily. So I think it could be that. I honestly think most of it was I wasn't who they wanted.
Yep.
And radicals are used to not getting what we want and being told you got to vote for what we gave because Gary's way better than the other options, which he was. I mean, Gary's way better than Trump or Hillary or Biden or any of that. Prags aren't quite as used to having to suck it up and go with what the delegate chose. And even though I'm a very Prag-friendly radical, as is Joe, I think that some people were like, no, they're used to that right there. They're used to getting one of those and telling the radicals to step in line. And we do. We step in line and we help as much as we can, or most of us do. And I think a few of them are now experiencing what they've been telling. What's that?
John is holding up the only shirt he owns with sleeves to make the green screen
just to make the green screen work. That's funny. Yeah, but so I think there was some of that. I think it was some just anti-Spikeism, and I gave them a thing to laser focus their criticism towards. And what I found is that having given them that jolt, moving forward, I've gotten a lot of strange new respect from a lot of them going, wow, I didn't know he could be this serious. I've been that serious from the beginning. Yes, I can be humorous. Yes, I can come on here and have a fun time, but I've always presented a serious message. This has always had a serious purpose. Even when I was, running with Vermin Supreme, it's always been from a serious angle.
And that's even one of the some of the comments I got after your show with Tom came out was, wow, I didn't know he could speak like that and have such good points, and right. I think you definitely solidified yourself as somebody who's serious. I
even wore a shirt for that. It was audio only. And I was
still wearing a shirt. Wow, that's some commitment to seriousness.
I buttoned the first 2 buttons on the little collar. I did that. No, I was, and he'll tell you because I actually had my video on at first. I'd forgotten to take it off, so even he could tell you I had a shirt on.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's serious business right there.
You could tell. It could tell, and I mean that sounded kind of constricted because I was like up here with the buttons, but no, I mean it was. And that's the point of going on Tom Woods and Dave Smith and whoever else will have me that it isn't a Nazi, is that you get in front of people and they realize, oh wow, he really is serious. Like, because I've gotten a lot of people, well, how do you get the nomination? That might be the first clue that maybe I'm not what you think I am.
Yep.
Because most of those people hadn't heard of me. A lot of them hadn't heard of me a month before. Almost none of them had heard of me 6 months to a year before. Maybe that was the first hint that there's more to it than me just being silly on the Chris and Jesse show.
So I endorsed you like a long time ago. Speaking of endorsements, you received an endorsement from the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. And that I was kind of surprised by that at the time because I know, as you know, like I've clashed with them a fair amount recently. How did you pull that off?
I didn't do any kind of special favors, didn't do any kind of anything. I've had a pretty good relationship with Michael Heiss for years now. And I've been a member of the caucus and a member of the group since 2017, 2018. And there have been times I've been critical of some of the stuff that's happened, although I think they have over time gotten much better at how they are dealing with, frankly, a massive influx of people joining the caucus and joining the party. And I think whenever you have a massive influx like that, you have to deal with the fact that many of the people coming in are coming in because they support 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 or 4 libertarian issues, but they also may be very anti-libertarian on some other things. And I mean, we've had that with the people we've brought in from the left, and kind of, disabusing them of their statist bugaboos over time. And I do think that that's gotten better over time, how they're dealing with that. But I've had my moments of saying, well, how are we handling this? How are we handling that? But basically the way that I did it was I reached out to Michael and, I stayed in touch with all the people with the caucus and said, hey, if you want to do an AMA, I'd be happy to have it. I'd be happy to do it. I organized Vermin's AMA with them. I said, hey, let's try to do a debate. And I'm glad because they were the only ones that were able to get the other candidates to agree to a pre-convention debate. And because we all had to do the one right for the actual convention that we did the day before, but with Jim Turney. But up until that, I was the only one trying to debate. And to their credit, Mises got the others to the table, and it was on the strength of that. Well, we couldn't call it a debate; we had to call it a forum. But on the strength of that that performance at the forum, I didn't even know they were having a vote. Suddenly, I got all these texts and messages from people saying, I'm on the Mises XCOM, and from Michael himself saying, we just unanimously voted to endorse you. And I went, well, that's interesting. And then about was it an hour before or an hour after? It was a big Sunday because either an hour before or an hour after, I heard from people in the Radical Caucus that they had just voted to endorse me. And I thought, well, this is an interesting turn of events. and so, yeah, I mean, so it was really just on the way that I've done this moving forward. You reach out to them, you talk with them, you show where your common cause is, and you show, I show why I believe I'm the best pick in this cycle for VP. And it got me here. So here we are.
Nice.
Yeah, I see you as a really good bridge between all the different sides of things. You're able to really take all of those different aspects and really speak to everyone on their level. And that's a gift, man. That's an absolute gift. And I see you doing that. And I think that's why you're where you are right now.
Thank you. I mean, it's what I've done with my business. A lot of people don't, they know me as a podcaster. They don't know I started and ran and grew and owned and operated a successful business for the better part of 20 years. That's actually what my history is. I started a web design company in my teens back in 1999 and grew it into a pretty successful company. And it was after getting my MS diagnosis that I decided to focus the rest of my life on spreading the message of liberty. And so I sold it and retired from that. But it is those things that I learned in leadership and sales and communications and marketing that I've applied to my messaging with Muddy Waters Media. And it's what I've applied to this campaigning. And I guess, the proof is in the pudding. I went from, hey guys, my name's Spike Cohen. I'm running for VP, to getting the nomination in roughly a 6-month period. So, or I guess just under a 5.5 month period. So, and I plan to apply those same skills moving forward in the general election. I think we'll have similarly successful results as a result of that.
We just got a comment from Jose Luis Castaneda, who says, Jesus, I just tuned in. This looks like a circus of serious discussion.
Yes.
I like that. A circus of serious discussion. I think that should
serious
be a circus phrase. Yeah. The serious circus.
I'm going to start using that. When people say, oh, you're trying to turn the Libertarian Party into a circus, I'll say, oh, yes, a serious circus.
I like that. Yeah.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Seriousness, actually. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So. Go ahead, John.
No, you ask your question.
Okay.
I've been monopolizing the questions.
Yeah, somebody had actually commented a little bit earlier. It's actually like a policy type kind of question. So I'm kind of curious too. What kind of consequences would you put on, or not necessarily consequences, but how would you handle, like a country like China and their kind of role in the coronavirus pandemic, kind of making it. Playing it down and, ultimately possibly making it much more serious than it could have been. What's the libertarian way of dealing with something like that?
Well, the beauty of libertarianism is it deals with things at its core. Well, what do we have at its core? We have an authoritarian government that is able to exert itself in the way that it does and impose itself around the world. Not as much as our empire does, but quite a bit as much for their size, on the strength of their relationships with cronies who have built up their economy by bringing jobs from the Western world over to them. But why have they brought those jobs there? Because of the regulatory burdens that those same cronies have imposed domestically on U.S. businesses, because they knew that when it came to it, they could then turn around and move their jobs to China and to Malaysia and to South Korea and to wherever else that they can move them, and leave all the small and medium businesses, all of their competitors here, unable to compete, unable to spend the billions of dollars to, refit their entire base of operations overseas. They couldn't afford to, grow their relationships with authoritarian dictatorships across the world. They couldn't do all of that. So they either went out of business or just really struggled to compete in the first place. So that was intentionally done. That was a poison pill that was intentionally added in order to harm our domestic business market and allow the cronies to move their base of operations overseas. Now, there are many, many bad consequences of that. The ones we talk about the most are the financial consequences. Small businesses, the gap between small and large businesses continues to grow because those businesses, those small ones, can't compete with the large ones. And also the number of people that are losing their work because their jobs are being, the jobs that they had are being outsourced and offshored to other places. But there's also an environmental consequence. And that consequence is that the carbon footprint of a given product has gone up exponentially, because instead of being made somewhere in the US and shipped domestically, or maybe even in Canada and shipped here, or possibly even shipped in the same state that you live in where it was made, it's being made all the way clear on the other side of the country in places that have no environmental protections at all, and then shipped all the way back here on a tanker. So the per product carbon footprint of those products, of the products and goods and services that we consume, has gone up exponentially. That has harmed the environment. But then another effect, the one that we're talking about now, is the political consequence of allowing these authoritative governments, authoritarian dictatorship governments, to continue to grow unchecked on the back of that relationship that they have with Western crony businesses. So simply removing those regulatory burdens fixes so many things. It fixes so many problems, because the problem isn't trade or the trade deficit or any of that stuff. It's not that. The problem is that artificially those jobs are being made more affordable over there because of impositions from government on the market here. So one of the biggest punishments, quote unquote, that we could do to the Chinese government is to remove all the regulatory burdens here that are making it impossible to do business here and to have jobs here and to produce things here. And not just labor and regulatory stuff, but intellectual property patents that don't allow for small batch 3D printing that could replace a lot of the major manufacturing that's happening with companies that squat on sometimes decades old patents. All of those reforms that make us freer and decentralize the power and the authority and the wealth also do harm to those who would manipulate, including our own government, but also the Chinese government, to manipulate their centralization of power in such a way to harm all of us.
I like it. So instead of further punishing China, further punishing people in China, we unpunish people here, and essentially the effect is, well, better than just punishing people and the government.
It removes they get a punishment in that you now have to provide value to the market.
Right.
And for a foreign company, government, whatever else, if you bring it back more and more to the actual people, the actual market, they can't act that way. They have to be less authoritarian. They have to be more open. They have to be all of the things that they need to demonstrate value to the greater market. And you do that by decentralizing things. So again, in this case, removing those burdens, it, like you said, it doesn't really punish anyone. It simply takes the boot off the neck of the people to be able to do it here, which makes them less attractive. They were only attractive for artificial reasons. They were only attractive because of the impositions on the market here and in other countries in the developed world. Remove those barriers, they're not as attractive anymore. Should we still have open and free trade with them in every other country? Absolutely. But again, remove the barriers. Allow the equilibrium of the spontaneous action that happens within individuals acting in voluntary cooperation and competition in the greater market that will always lead to better and more equitable and less harmful and less abusive outcomes than anything you're ever going to get from the state.
That was such a good answer that I feel really weird not wearing a shirt right now.
Yeah, we seriously became a serious circus right there. That was a
very serious circus.
Serious circus right there. Yes.
We have another question, and this one comes from Stephen Drowlett, and Stephen asks, well, he says, I'm trying to think of normie CNN questions you may get. And that's a good point, Stephen. And then Stephen asks, what are your thoughts on reparations?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, we have to stop the harm, right? So anytime that you talk about how do we deal with the problem, if the problem is still being acutely made worse, you have to stop that, right? Like if I'm a doctor and a patient comes in and I go, man, that's a bad wound there, but they're still being stabbed, you stop the stabbing. So in the case of this, what are the problems that are related to why people of African descent are asking for reparations or are calling for reparations? It's not just slavery. It's the disproportionate harm that's being done to them at the hands of the state even now. So when I talk about ending qualified immunity, when I talk about ending the 1033 militarization program, military surplus program, when I talk about ending civil asset forfeiture, when I talk about ending the war on drugs, when I talk about ending gun control, all of those things are things that are disproportionately harming people of color and other marginalized communities. So right off the bat, doing those things, removing those particular boots from the neck of the people also disproportionately helps people of color and also other marginalized communities, because again, they're the ones that are being the most disproportionately harmed by it. But when it comes to, so once we remove those things, once we are on a more even playing field in terms of how the state is treating people, and now we look at how do we repair the harms that have been done, I think that there is a real case to be made for the idea of this, because let's look at one of the biggest injustices, one of the ones that's not talked about nearly as much, that was done directly by government to the descendants of African slaves in the United States. And that is their refusal to allow Black people, freed slaves, to participate in the land giveaway programs that were happening during the mid to late 1800s. If you look, if the freed slaves had been able to participate in those programs the same way that Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, natural born people, and everything else, if they and the natives had been allowed to participate in those programs, they would have tens of trillions of dollars more wealth in their families than they have now. What were they given? They were told to get off the land that they had worked to cultivate. Or they were told you can continue, you can live on this land, but now you have to work for it as, you know, a share, and it was called sharecropping, but basically you can work for the right to buy back the land that you already rightfully own by virtue of the 200 or 300 years of labor at that point that your families had put into that land prior to you. Instead of not only letting them have that land because they already worked for it and should have been by all accounts allowed to own it, but also allowed to get other land that other people were getting into. That alone is tens of trillions of dollars. So what do we do now? Because the biggest problem is if we talk about reparations now, that means taxing everyone to pay for it, or printing out endless reams of trillions of dollars, which is just another form of tax, because those dollars are lent to the federal government, which means now you're paying it back with interest. And because they printed out all this extra money, you've now lost money. You've now lost the value of your currency. Every time they printed out more of those Federal Reserve notes without any corresponding increase of value, now all your Federal Reserve notes that you already had in your pocket and in your wallet and under your bed and in the bank account, wherever you keep your Federal Reserve notes, they've all lost value too, as they have continued to do. That's not a good way to handle it. It also creates discord, because if we say, well, you know, to deal with this thing that happened a long time ago, we're going to tax everyone and give some of it to this one group of people, that's going to cause more problems that, you know, are going to make things worse long term. But the federal government sits on tens of trillions of dollars. And by the way, this is not an official campaign platform or anything else. I'm talking about my opinion moving forward on an idea that could deal with this, the question of reparations. If the government starts either giving away or selling away some of the assets that it claims, which is worth tens of trillions of dollars, claims to mineral rights, claims to land rights. They claim entire sections of the seafloor in the Atlantic and Pacific, which have unknown tens or even hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of resources buried below them. All of those things, if they sold those off or gave them away and gave them to the descendants of slaves, or better yet, sold it off, and then put that money into trust funds for each individual African American, that would be a way of doing reparations. And not only would it not raise taxes, it would make the government smaller. The government would reduce its size and wealth and power and control over things, and pay off a debt that it owes to something like 38 million people at the same time. And for that matter, we could do that for the natives as well, do something similar for the natives. So you could deal with the two largest injustices in U.S. history and make the government smaller at the same time. But I think at the very least right now, we need to be stopping the harm so that there's not even more damage that we're having to answer for down the road.
Well, I think you passed the CNN test, so that was, again, a great answer.
I want the MSNBC test. As the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, at what point during the election cycle are you supposed to go on MSNBC and vouch for Hillary Clinton?
I think I was already supposed to do that, right? When did he do that? Well, I have to look that up now. When did Bill Wells?
I think it was like a week before the election or something like that.
Oh, was it that?
I really think it was.
Oh, no, you're right. It was November 2nd. Oh, man. Yeah. What a scum move. I thought he did it early.
No.
I thought he was like, he got the nomination. He's like, ha, suckers. And then he went and vouched for Hillary.
No.
He did it like 2 days before.
Yeah, it was during early voting. He did that the day, I believe he did that like the day after I voted.
Oh, and you thought, crap, now I have to change my vote.
Well, I don't live in a swing state.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, I don't live in a swing state, so he said to me it didn't matter whether or not I voted for him, which is that kind of transitions us into like some of the questions that we had prepared, actually.
I plan to make every state a swing state for us, because I plan to get us on that debate stage. And with Joe Jorgensen between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, anyone who's seen Joe Jorgensen talk for even 5 minutes will know how that turns out. You have a self-made, self-accomplished, brilliant senior lecturer who tells people how things need to be fixed for a living, in between two bumbling men who can barely form a coherent sentence between the two of them at this point, and who are enmeshed and elbow deep in being responsible for everything that's happening right now. And they also happen to have all sorts of credible abuse accusations and rape accusations against them. And they both have a history. Donald Trump has a history of, bragging about his exploits with women and just the way he mistreats women. And I mean, we've all seen Joe Biden sniffing children and making them feel uncomfortable. And you contrast her with them, and then you have me debating Mike electrocute the gays Pence, and whoever has the misfortune of thinking that it's a good idea to be Joe Biden's running mate. I think that all bets are off at that point. I think we have a real shot of winning at that point. So no, I absolutely intend to make all 50 states into swing states.
Well, I guess that gets us into, for people who have, obviously, we're going to vote for you. Spoilers.
Thank you.
But other than us, for people who have legitimately have either no idea what the Libertarian Party stands for, or only know us by reputation, which involves other people taking their clothes off on TV, Hudak.
We could win if John Hudak hadn't stripped on June 13th.
But we're trying to convince, you say that there's going to be a certain proportion that it's always going to vote for one party or the other, but the majority of people in the country are not hardline for one party or the other.
No, they're not.
It is winnable. How do we convince this many millions of people that the Libertarian Party is worth supporting if they don't actually know anything about us?
Well, the good news is that the Republicans and Democrats have done a great job disabusing anyone of thinking that they're the people that they should vote for, at least for, look at how this year has gone. We have a pandemic that happened because the CDC actively fought to stop healthcare workers from containing the pandemic back when that was possible. We then had state governments that stepped in and overcorrected for that by telling everyone to stay home and don't go outside and don't go to the park and don't go to the beach. You can definitely still go to Walmart and Costco and Target and crowd together in those buildings and be sure to buy stuff on Amazon. And don't worry, we're going to bail out the airlines and the hotels, but don't go to your local furniture store with the 4 other people that'll be there, because that's dangerous. And don't go to, get your hair cut, because that's dangerous. It just so happened that they corrected everything so that all of our money would go to the same big businesses that they were also in the process of bailing out at the cost of trillions of dollars in debt that we and our children and grandchildren will be paying off for the next 40 years. We did get that $1,200 though, which is super sweet. Even though most of us were also told we weren't essential and shouldn't go outside. So that happened. And then in response to, decades, really centuries of police brutality, that public that was already so highly and intense and on edge with the lockdowns and everything else, the top finally blew off, and then they're now protesting in the streets and doing these protests. How did the police respond? By brutalizing them.
Yeah.
They showed up and said, "Stop attacking us." So the police said, "Attack them," and that's literally what they did.
Yep.
And simultaneously, they and I made a video about this. They cordoned off all of the protesters and all of their personnel and resources into doing this street battle against unarmed protesters who were peacefully protesting. And then they would leave the rest of the city vulnerable to looters and thieves and the people that say, "Oh, no one's going to come out if you call 911. Okay, well then I guess I'm going to get that Lego set I've always wanted. I'm going to get, those, I'm going to get, get my clothes for the summer or whatever else." And they destroy the businesses. And again, the big ones, they have the insurance. The small ones, they're out of business. They've lost everything. That is on the strength of what the Democrats and Republicans have done to us. All of this is happening in real time, and people are seeing. This is the conclusion of what happens with Republicans and Democrats being in charge of everything. And Republicans and Democrats have been in charge of everything for the better part of 160 years. and they brought us this. And it's only going to get worse until we replace them. So when people say, well, how do I know I'm not throwing my vote away voting third party? I say, you're throwing your vote away continuing to vote for the people who created this mess. And they're helping prove my point every single day. So I think that that coupled with the fact that these lockdowns create an incredible opportunity for us to be on an equal playing field by virtue of the fact that we're all just people sitting in front of our webcams right now. The difference being they're in front of their webcams with their terrible ideas, having to explain why you should trust them for another 4 years when they're the ones who did all this. And we're the ones saying that they did all this. And we have great common sense, intuitive solutions that will fix or at least greatly ameliorate these problems. I think this is the year of the libertarians. And I truly believe that.
So from that, looking back at the last, you say 4 to 8 to 12 to 20 to 50 years, you look at a bunch of scenarios where you have the president and the vice president acting, their decisions obviously impacting generations at a time.
Right.
So putting yourself into certain situations, and with you and Joe, what can you say, taking any given example from the past 10, 15 years, what would you say that you would have done differently than Trump and Pence would have done for, let's say, the conflict in Syria or the viral outbreak this year or anything else? What would be the solution to these problems as opposed to what they did?
The short answer is we wouldn't have done any of this stuff. But specific examples with what we were talking about with the CDC. Here's a real primer, and Jordan can vouch for me because he's been following this even more closely and knows the big words that I don't know. Essentially, the CDC blocked medical professionals, from being able to test for COVID-19 for the first 6 to 8 weeks that it was here. And they did so because there was this old, ridiculous regulation that said that if you want to test for a new virus, you have to get approval to do so. And it's a Byzantine process that can take months to get approval. And so thankfully, there were some doctors who engaged in some civil disobedience. Apparently, these test kits Jordan can tell you, these test kits are relatively easy to make if you know how to make them. And when they had people coming in saying, hey, doc, I just got back from Wuhan, China, and I'm not feeling that hot, they went and tested them. And some of those came back. And so they went to the CDC and said, hey, listen, it's here and we need to do something. The CDC's initial response was, okay, destroy all those test results, tell no one, don't even tell the people that tested positive, and don't treat them. Thankfully, they again put their Hippocratic oath above whatever the that particular magic parchment said to do. And in another even braver act of civil disobedience, they released it to the public. And that civil disobedience pressured the CDC to relax their guidelines so that you still now have to get approval, but it's like a provisional thing where in the process of waiting for your approval, you can already go ahead and start testing as long as you still report those results to the government. So that 6 to 8 weeks, that would have never happened during our time. First of all, we would have never said it was a hoax. We would have never said, oh, this is some Chinese thing. We don't have to worry about it. The very second we would have known that, even before all this would have happened, we would have already gotten rid of all those ridiculous regulations in the first place. So that as soon as people started going into doctors' offices and saying, doc, I'm not feeling too hot, they'd already be making the tests. And we already would have this under control, and we already would have it contained. Would it still be here? Yes, it would, because this is a disease that spreads asymptomatically, and it's simply impossible to stop it. But would we have had to have these lockdowns? No. Would the number of people dying been nearly as high? No. Would individual states maybe still said, hey, let's not fill stadiums right now? Possibly, or they would have just reduced the capacity, and we would have left that up to the states to decide. But at the end of the day, the thing would be much better. The question of Syria, we would have gotten out of it, because the neocon lie that if we just stay in a little bit longer, then everything will turn out fine. If we get out right now, it's going to be a huge mess. And by the way, that's true. If and whenever we do get out, it's going to be a mess. It's not going to be the mess we're told where everything's going to fall apart. There will be problems, but those problems are going to happen whether we're there or not. And they're only going to get worse if we stay there. When we leave, then in the process of things being bad initially, it will eventually get better and the healing can begin, because you don't have a major power stepping in and imposing itself on the population there. You don't have children growing up to fear sunny days, because those are the days when the drones and the bombers can best target people. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your children being scared that it's not overcast? That's the world that they have lived in for 3 generations now. And you wonder why they hate us. We didn't do, any of us here, we didn't do anything to them. Our government did. And what they see is the Americans are doing this to us. And our governments are either in on it or powerless to stop them. And so this is the blowback. They go and join whatever organization says that they're fighting back. And yes, those organizations are very unsavory groups that were formed often by the CIA. But they join these groups because they're the only group that says they're fighting back. Now, why did the CIA help to arm these groups? Why do our intelligence and State Department actually arm groups that hate us? Because that's the boogeyman they use to keep us involved forever. All of that has to stop. We would stop all of that. We would stop contributing to the continued destabilization of entire sections of the planet, and we would instead trade with them and have good relationships with them and build dialogue with them so that their children grow up to love us and to want to structure their society in a similar way that we have ours and influence them that way, because this isn't working. I was a neocon for years. The neocon lie has brought us where we are, and it will only make it worse.
I was going to ask you where Aleppo was next, but you killed that.
A what-o? No,
a leopard?
You know what was funny was I was being asked, someone asked me about the Ahmaud Arbery shooting in Georgia. And I hesitated because I wasn't sure where I wanted to start. If I wanted to start with the whole good old boy system or systemic racism or gun rights, or I didn't know where I want. So, and it was maybe like a 1.5 seconds hesitation. And they said, "Oh no, is this your Aleppo moment?" I'm like, no. I know who it is. The father that got shot. I know exactly who it is in Georgia or whatever. But it was funny because it was literally me just taking a pause and going, and I think I even like kind of looked up, but it was thinking like, where do I want to take this? Like, where do I want to start with it? And they were like, "Oh no, is this your Aleppo moment?" I'm like, "It's not my Aleppo moment. I know who Ahmaud Arbery is, even if I can't, unfortunately, say his name correctly." But yeah, no, I know where Aleppo is. I know where Syria is. I'm actually one of those people that if you tell me a country, I can point it out on the map, whatever the country is. So my little magic power I have.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Where's Sealand?
Where's Sealand?
Sealand.
That's a place?
Country of Sealand.
The country of Sealand. It's next to Atlantis.
Just about to say Atlantis.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
The final question that we had was obviously you've kind of answered it by now, but based on what the differences between obviously the Libertarian Party and the 2 other major parties, and between obviously you guys and the previous sets of presidents and vice presidents, is going forward, how are you guys better equipped to get us out of all the messes that we're in than the people who are currently in office or running in opposition to them from other major parties?
Right. We're better equipped because we have a better philosophy and praxis on moving forward, what we want to actually do. Joe Jorgensen and I seek a world in which the people are set free from what we call in the Libertarian Party, the cult of the omnipotent state, the idea that government is this beneficial thing and that all good ideas and all good things must come from it. We recognize as libertarians who believe that you own yourself, your life, your body, your labor, and the product of your labor, your property, we recognize that aggression against anyone, taking from anything that they inherently own, is not only wrong from a moral standpoint, because you shouldn't harm people, you shouldn't take their things, you shouldn't try to order them around and tell them what to do, but it also doesn't work. If I could take from the 4 of you whenever I see fit, instead of actually having to provide value in exchange for things that I need, if I could just take from you whenever I see fit, I'm not going to be a good steward of that, because I can just take whenever I want. I can just take more from you whenever I want. And you're not going to be as good of a steward of what you have, because you know I can come and take it from you whenever I want. And what are the bad ideas that come from Republicans and Democrats as a result of their bad government solutions, but a situation in which they have presumed the authority to take from all of us whenever they see fit? It doesn't work. And so Joe Jorgensen and I propose to completely upend everything, end the wars, end the war on drugs, end the police brutality, end systemic racism at the federal level, use the Department of Justice as an actual department for justice and use it to go after abusive police officers and law enforcement agencies with a long history, police departments have a long history of abuse and of discrimination. Go after, use government as a tool to go after bad actors, and then the rest of the time not use it to go after anyone, and let people be able to be free to find connections with each other and fix the problems that have been that they face and move forward in life. Imagine a world in which the wars have ended, the troops are home, the suicides have ended, the PTSD has ended, the traumatic brain injury has ended, not to mention the countless amount of suffering that's happening around the world has ended. We're no longer spending trillions to spread this empire that helps us in no way and causes uncountable harm to us, so that the healing can begin. Imagine a world in which the camps on the border have been closed and the people have been set free, and people can now come and go as they please, as the founders saw fit, without any limit or regulation. And America is reopened to trade and migration as we as individual people see fit. Imagine a world in which our education decisions are taken out of the hands of cronies and politicians and bureaucrats and put back in the hands of teachers and parents for their children. Imagine a world in which your healthcare decisions are taken away from those same bureaucrats and cronies and politicians and put back between you and your doctor, so that your healthcare can be more affordable and more accessible. Imagine a world in which you are happier and safer and freer and healthier, and in which your children are going to live in a better future than we could have ever previously imagined. That is the world that Joe Jorgensen and I seek to create. And with your help and support and your vote in November, that's exactly what we will do. And so I invite you to go to JOJ2020. That's JoJ2020.com. Sign our volunteer form. If you're able to contribute, press the donate button. We would love to have any donation that you can give. We would love for you to sign up and follow us on social media. We would love for you to help share our content and tell people why you're supporting us, why you're supporting the Libertarian Party, why you are a libertarian. And we can do this together. We can grow together, and we can grow this party together and grow this movement together and change the cultural conversation together. And we can take that all the way to the White House.
Well, you've got my vote.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for coming on today. We know you're a busy guy, and you did a good job keeping your shirt on, so people know you're serious now.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think we're about wrapped up.
We hope to have you back on again in the future, Spike.
Oh, absolutely. I love you guys. I can't wait to come on again.
So I was told I need to plug we have like a subreddit now. So there's reddit.com/r/Fakertarians. I never plug stuff, so I'm just fitting it all in now. Twitter.com/Fakertarians. And then we got this page. If anyone's watching this, they're probably watching it on this page. So I think that about sums it up.
If you're watching it from my page, it's called Fakertarians. Be sure to join it. It's one of my favorite groups. I love it.
Yeah, we're plugging everything because George Soros and the Koch brothers all cut us off. So we're just trying to get as much advertisement out there as we can.
We need more Trump bucks.
Yeah,
give us your Trump bucks.
My last Soros check was only $1.50. That didn't go very far.
That's 83 cents.
Talk about diminishing returns, right? I remember when they were giving us like $100,000 a pop. Now it's gotten rough.
Yeah, times have definitely changed. Well, but that's going to do it for this edition of the Fakertarians on this June 13th, 2020. Thanks so much to our very special guest, Mr. Spike Cohen, Libertarian Vice Presidential Candidate. Thanks to all of you, our viewers and listeners out there. And we'll be doing this again at some point in the future. We'll tell you when, because we make those decisions. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, Spike.
Thank you.